That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. You guys can't see him, but we can see him. We have a producer. His name is Brennan Finder. He is here to help the show be a better show. It's a great show, but it can always be a little bit better. The issues are the issues, whether you win or lose. That's what Ryan Day likes to tell us every single week before he sends out 4 tight ends at the 26-yard line. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that after they do it again on Saturday against Wisconsin. In the meantime, we are 3 weeks away from the first college football playoff rankings of the season coming out. And quite frankly, if Ohio State keeps winning, the only ones that matter are the first ones and the last ones. So today we are projecting the college football playoff, but we're not necessarily doing it the way that everybody else does it, where we just go, here's my 12. Why don't you have this team at 4? Why don't you have this team at 7? No, you're wrong for having this team at 2. We want to have a more nuanced conversation about that. So instead, what we're doing is we're putting these teams into 4 different categories. There's the college football playoff locks. And that's essentially, these are the elite football teams that have separated themselves from the pack, both in resume, but there's also an overall eye test. You have the teams who are in control of their own destiny. It's a step below the elite category, but at the same time, in a situation where they're still in control of their own destiny. You have the on the fence, which is the bubble teams, mostly in control, but don't necessarily have a ton of room for error either. And then I need some help. They could make it, but they literally need help to do so. But we're also going to talk about some G5 schools, plus make a kind of a crazy take about a team that we think could still make the college football playoff, even if things look a little eerie right now. And we're going to start in the locks category, where I think there's only 3 teams for me, and it's Miami, Indiana, and Ohio State. Anybody have any disagreement with those 3 being in the, yeah, you had a quality first 6 games of the season. The back end of your schedule is maybe a little bit, well, for 2 of those 3 especially, the back end of your schedule is maybe a little bit more fluff. You should be a lock to make the college football playoff.
I have Oregon in that group as well. I still think Oregon's among the elite teams in the country. I think when you look at how they played against Indiana, tie game in the fourth quarter, Indiana puts together a drive and Oregon doesn't respond, right? Tante Moore throws a pick. I think that game easily could have swung the other way. And that's not to take away from Indiana. Obviously, I think Indiana's in this group without much hesitation. But I think Oregon's in it too. I still think Oregon is a national title contender. If you were to tell me which teams can win a national title right now, I would say these 4. So I have Oregon in my lock still. I think down the stretch, obviously the game at Washington is tricky, but outside of that, they don't really have the toughest schedule remaining. The Penn State win on the road. I think regardless of what Penn State has become and what they look like down the stretch or whatever Penn State is, I think winning in the whiteout is still going to be respected to some extent. Now, what is it, obviously lesser degree than what it was, when it happened. But I think there's still some level of respect to that. Listen, if we're going to say going into the swamp and winning is still a difficult thing to do, then I think going into Penn State and winning is still an impressive thing to do. So I have Oregon in my locks. I went back and forth on it a little bit just because they do have a loss. Obviously, these other 3 teams don't: Ohio State, Miami, and Indiana. But I think Oregon is still among the nation's best. And I think if you were to, collect the group of coaches that you trust to, rally their team from a loss and be able to respond and, be able to put up a fight down the stretch and into the playoff, I think Dan Lanning's in that group. So I have Oregon in that mix.
Oregon man. Do you have Oregon amongst yours?
I do. I have Oregon in that mix. I also have another team, but just to real quick on Oregon. I hate to use the Q word with professional teams, with college teams, but Penn State might have quit after that Oregon game. And the Penn State that has played the last 2 weeks, I don't think was the Penn State that played Oregon. I think Penn State, for as much as we talk about it, I think going off the rails, they were the team back then, a couple of weeks ago. It's crazy as how fast this has gone, but they were that team then of just, hey, they're really good, but they're not going to beat an elite team because that's what they do. But they're still the 7, 8, 9, 10th best team in the country. I think that is true about Penn State. So that is an interesting conversation about Oregon because I don't think their win obviously does not look good, but I think you also have to use context for it. The other team that I have as a lock, because I just cannot see them missing the playoff at this point, is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I think they're in. And the reason why I think they're in is because I think even if they go 11-1, I think they're going to win the Big 12. They have beaten the snot out of everybody that they've played. Like they played Utah. You remember they played that game? It was like 10 a.m. local because they wanted to play that game on Big Noon. Like they played that game at Utah and they kind of manhandled Utah. Like they really, really did their best to kind of control the line of scrimmages. They outgained Utah 484 to 263. They are far and away, I think, the best team in the Big 12. They play at Arizona State this weekend. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, you're not probably going to lose those games. They play BYU, another undefeated team, but they're at home. UCF, West Virginia. I think there's one losable game for Texas Tech on this schedule. I think they're going to go 11-1. Like I think this team is really good, and like I think there's going to be a lot of they're not in the SEC, they're not in the Big Ten, so they can't be that good. I think Texas Tech might give some poor, unsuspecting SEC Big Ten team a problem in the playoff because that team is very, very good at the line of scrimmage, and they are going to bludgeon some team in the line of scrimmage. They're doing it in the Big 12, and I think they can do it. So, yeah, I think Texas Tech is in. I think they're going to run the table and get in. I don't imagine a scenario when I laid this out to where you go, you know what? They're not amongst the elite from what we've seen, and I think they're in the playoff. I think they're going to make it.
So I'm going to put a pin in the Texas Tech and Oregon conversations because I don't think either of you have them in the number one overall seed conversation. And I don't have either one of those teams in this bracket. So it would be the first thing that we can argue about. Who's got the best chance of being the number one overall seed of these three, Stefan? If the playoffs started, I hate that conversation. Who's got the best chance of being the number one overall? I hate that if the playoffs started today. They don't start today. So who has the best chance looking at their path of claiming that number one seed?
I still think it's Ohio State. I think the eye test goes a long way for Ohio State. I think people see, just how dominant of a team this is, and they can kind of play whatever style they want. I think reputation does go into this, and being the reigning champs and looking as good as you have, I think is going to help out Ohio State. And based on what we saw from Texas against Oklahoma, there might be a little bit of a second life to Texas, and that could end up still being a really good win on Ohio State's resume. Washington has a chance to start making some noise in these next 3 weeks to put themselves in the top 25 of the CFP poll, and I think that would go a long way for Ohio State. I think the Illinois win is going to still look fine for Ohio State, regardless of what Illinois is, whether they're receiving votes or whether they're getting consideration for the CFP top 25, or if they are in it, in 3 weeks. I think Illinois is still in a spot where they could probably be in the top 25 come, the poll in a few weeks. So I think it's going to be Ohio State. Obviously, Miami and Indiana both have really strong cases. Indiana has the best win in the country. Miami has 2 or 3, really impressive wins on their resume. But I think it would be Ohio State. I think it will be Ohio State in that first poll.
Can you make a case that Miami has the worst chance of these three simply because 2 of these 3 get to play each other? So if you're saying Ohio State's got the best chance, then if Indiana beats Ohio State on a neutral site, then I would assume they jump Miami. In that scenario.
Yeah. I was sorry. I was understanding your question as in terms of who's going to be the 1 seed in the first poll. Yeah, no doubt. I think Miami probably has the safest route to being the 1 seed when the playoff does arrive. Yeah, because they have probably the least risk.
I'm saying let's just that's why we're projecting all the way to the end of this thing.
Yeah.
If Ohio State and Miami are both undefeated and Indiana is both undefeated, even if Indiana is 3, wouldn't Indiana just jump Ohio State and Miami if they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game?
Yeah, I think Indiana and Ohio State would just have a higher risk of losing. So, like, if you were to take a safer route, I think you would say, yeah, Miami, because they're probably going to win out and have an easier path being in the ACC. If I'm trying to explain this. If the betting odds were like who's going to be the number 1 seed, and it was Ohio State, Oregon, Ohio State, Miami, Indiana. Ohio State's probably the favorite. Miami's close second, and Indiana's third. But if it was Big Ten or Miami, I think Big Ten would be probably a pretty heavy favorite because whoever wins that Big Ten title game, if Indiana's 3 and Miami's 2, I think Indiana would probably jump them just because I think a win against Ohio State at this point would have a lot of weight. I think that's why maybe when we talk about Michigan later, like what a win for Michigan against Ohio State would mean for a team like that, I think would carry enough weight to where the Big Ten champ probably gets the 1 seed. Miami would make an interesting case, though.
Yeah, like the thing that I'm thinking of is like, what if Ohio State loses to Michigan in the last week of the regular season and then wins the Big Ten a week later and they beat Indiana? And then you're sitting there and it's like 13-0 Miami versus 12-1 Ohio State. And
yeah, I think the undefeated would be too strong there.
Especially because it's Miami and because of some of the teams they've beat.
Yeah, but it does. I don't think the brands matter. It's just Miami's undefeated and the Big Ten champ's not.
Yeah,
I just think it doesn't matter. Like it could be Duke undefeated. They're undefeated and the Big Ten champion is not. I guess my next question then is, you guys have more teams in this mix. So let's start with the teams we all have in common: Miami, Ohio State, Indiana. What has to change? Like what realistically would have to happen for them to no longer be locks? And this isn't just about them getting a bye. It's just we're saying they are locks to be one of the 12 teams to make the field, whether they are number 1 or they are number 12. What would have to change realistically for one of these teams for them to, I guess, unlock? And who's, I guess, last 6 games of the regular season presents a case where you could make the genuine case that one of these teams, if we get to the end of the season and they're not one of the 12, this happened?
Well, it's tough because I think both teams have a pretty favorable path down the stretch, right? You need upsets, right? So like for me to say, hey, Ohio State's going to lose at Wisconsin and lose at home against Penn State, now they're suddenly looking, 9-2 going to Michigan in the eyes, you're going to say that's crazy. But like that's the type of stuff that it would take. I think what would be, because I think what's tough is like both of these teams at 10-2 probably have a decent case to still make it in, just because they've got decent wins on their resume. You would probably need, like, if we're like, what would happen for Ohio State or Indiana not to make the playoff? We're probably talking 10-2 and maybe throw in an injury to like a key player. Like I think that might be the level of where we're at with those teams.
I think if Miami does what Miami's done the last couple of years, they're going to miss the playoff, where they start stumbling. Because that's the one thing about the Big Ten and the SEC. You're talking about the 2-loss situation. I think those conferences get a level of grace that the other 2 Power 4 conferences don't get. So if Miami does what Miami was you could have called them a lock at one point last year. And then they fell apart in November. That's what they've done the last couple of years, is they've gone from the team that we ranked too high early on and then they get killed in the first 3 weeks of the season to a team where it's like, oh, they're 8-0. This is fun. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, they lost 2 ACC games. We can't put them in anymore. I think if Miami, and their schedule's easier this year, right? Louisville, Stanford, SMU, and Syracuse, who's lost their quarterback for the year, NC State, Virginia Tech, Pitt. Like, it's not the most ideal schedule to find the upset. But I think if they're 10-2 and the ACC gets a little weird, and then all of a sudden they're not in the ACC championship game, I think they're getting left out of the playoff. I just think their schedule and their history best tends itself to the idea of they get left out of the playoff, even though they started the season out 6-0.
No doubt.
Yeah, of those 3 that we're talking about, Ohio State, Indiana, Miami, I think Miami is probably the likeliest option. But like you just rattled off their schedule, like they play 4-1 Louisville on Friday. They're 13.5-point favorites. Like they're like, even if they have that, like, what in the world is Miami doing? Like, what's going on here? Loss. Like, and that could be at Pitt the Saturday after Thanksgiving and the last game of the regular season. I mean, you take a bunch of kids from Miami and ask them to go play in Western Pennsylvania on Saturday in November. That might not go great, but especially if they've already like clinched a spot in the ACC championship game, maybe they're not as motivated. But like, I don't see them losing twice in the regular season. And I think if Miami goes to the ACC championship game at 11-1, I think they're in no matter what. Like, I don't envision them getting to Charlotte and then all of a sudden it's, hey, well, if they lose to 11-1 Georgia Tech, they're out.
Committee showed us that last year with SMU, like that.
Right.
Yeah, 11-1
So I
Miami.
don't think they're
losing the conference title game is not getting out. I think Brennan's probably watching over there thinking you guys are counting out Syracuse against Miami. Not so fast, guys.
If Angeli was healthy. Okay.
At least he's honest.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta be irrational as a fan. So let's transition here, because the next two things I have are which team in your control category is close to being a lock, and which team in your control category is teetering on dropping down. We'll get to that second one in a second. But you two have two teams in my control category, in your lock category. But also, because I have to take this opportunity, no SEC teams are locks. Love that for us.
They all got to play each other.
Yeah, but if one of them was also just really awesome, we'd be like, okay, if there was an LSU amongst this mix, we'd be calling them a lock, and we're not.
I think there's going to be a team from the SEC that emerges as like a true contender. Like I think someone from that mix is going to rise to the top, and like I think right now Texas A&M is kind of everyone's favorite. Like,
sure,
listen. We know what the Alabama tenure with Kalen DeBoer has looked like. If they have somehow flipped the switch and found a turning point post Florida State, I think like if it's 12-1 Bama, I don't think it's crazy to say that team can win a national title. So I think someone's going to emerge, but I just don't know who that team is right now. It's a bit of a mess. It kind of feels like maybe an elevated version of the Big 12, where like last year's Big 12, where you just have no idea of who the best team in that mix is. And when someone emerges from it, like we saw last year, Arizona State emerged from the Big 12 and they were legit. They took Texas down to the wire, went to overtime against them in the playoff, right? Like someone from this SEC feels like they will emerge, but it's hard to call anyone a lock because I'm not exactly sure who that team is.
So let's start with Oregon, because they're in the Big Ten and we cover a Big Ten team. Both of you have them in the lock category. Do you not think that they're vulnerable? Because that's the other reason for why my lock category is so small, is because I don't see vulnerability there. Because even with Ohio State, okay, they might lose to Michigan. Okay, that's the only game I think they might lose. And again, we've talked about it over and over again. That's not a football thing. This is college football, the culture thing. And even if they lose that game, one loss they're not kicked out of the college football playoff. Oregon's going to beat Rutgers this weekend. They're going to beat Wisconsin next weekend. Iowa's fun. I don't think they lose that game, but I think it's fun. Iowa has this way of making you play the way Iowa wants to play football.
Iowa's
especially
tough. I don't know if I'd say fun.
I think it depends on what side of the fence you're on. I think if you're an Iowa fan,
you of all people, your infatuation for receivers and throwing the ball, you cannot say Iowa's like you're not allowed to say Iowa's
there
fun.
You go. There you go. I'm allowed to say Iowa's fun.
Okay, fine. Let me edit that then. It's not that I think they're fun to watch. I think they are always a interesting matchup to keep an eye on, because they have this way of making people play in a way that all of a sudden you look up and it's 17-14 with 4 minutes left in the game. So, okay, fair. I'm not 100% certain they're going to beat USC based on what I've seen from them so far this year. And Dan Lanning has the same problem with Washington that Ryan Day has with Michigan. So if there are, and they already have a home loss. So if there are two other games on the schedule where I could wrap my head around the idea that they could lose them, that it's hard for me to call them a lock, which is why for me, the safe landing spot, they were a team that's in my control category, but they're like knocking on the locked door going, hey, let me in. But I almost need them to get through the last 2 weeks of the season before I feel that way. Because it's if I think you can end your season 9-3 but also you could end your season 11-1. That sounds a lot more like I am in complete control of whether or not I make the playoff or not still, but it's hard to call me a lock when there are 2 games on the schedule that you're scared of still.
I disagree with your assessment because here's why. I think we're all in agreement they're going to beat Rutgers. They're going to beat Wisconsin. Anybody have maybe?
No, but those aren't the games I'm worried about. I'm worried about the 2 games they might lose.
So here's my point. So you're 7-1. You have a bye week going to Kinnick. And for as much as we talk about how tricky that game is, I think the bye week going into it helps. I think the bye week going in is positive. Okay. So if you win that one, you come home and you play Minnesota on a short week. And yeah, it's a short week and you just played Iowa, but Minnesota's got to fly to Oregon. Okay. There's 9-1. You play USC. Not a lock that they win that game. Not 100%. I think we're going to find out. But here's the thing. I don't think USC's that good. And I think USC's on get smoked alert this weekend. And if USC loses, like USC's 9.5-point underdogs to Notre Dame, if USC loses that game like 31-21, are we still coming on here going, I don't know, USC could get Oregon on the road? Because I would feel way worse about it.
Yes, because
I think it's unfair to
USC has the exact. First of all, forget what I said. I don't think it's unfair to think that a guy might lose the rivalry game when we cover a guy who's lost his rivalry game 4 years in a row.
Yeah, but
I'm
that's
not hearing that
same.
comment.
You can't say he's got a Ryan Day problem when they've lost 2 games. And they've lost 2 games.
He's only played Washington twice.
They beat a bad Washington team last year.
Okay.
And Ryan Day didn't. So that's not the same. They're not the same. They're not.
Ryan Day also has 1 win over Michigan.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? So, what are you talking about?
But Ryan Day's been there longer. Ryan Day's been there longer. Give him time.
Yeah, give it time. Exactly. We thought that would be the only loss.
Coach would be like, oh, he lost the rivalry game. He must have a rivalry problem. No, it does. Dan Lanning won the game against Washington last year against a bad Washington team. Ryan Day has had problems with bad Michigan teams.
He's had a problem with he's had a problem with one bad Michigan team.
Yeah. And he loses to good Michigan teams and bad Michigan teams. So they're different. I think they're different. That's what
you're saying is when Washington is good, Dan Lanning has a problem.
I don't think he has a problem. I don't think it's a Washington problem.
He's lost to 2 good Washington teams.
I think he lost to 2 good teams. I don't think it's a rivalry problem. We'll find out, but I don't think so. I don't think it's a rivalry problem. I don't think Dan Lanning is like, oh God, when I see that W, I melt. I don't think it's that.
I know. He just tries to bang a helmet in the locker room, and then he loses the football game. That's not. But regardless, here's the reason why Oregon. First of all, you just mapped out a world where they're 10-2 or 9-3.
Yeah, they're 10-2. They're in. They're 10-2 lock, and I don't think they're losing 3 games.
I'm not so sure about the 10-2 Big Ten teams.
10-2, I think 10-2. So
I'm not.
I think Oregon's the best bet of a 10-2 Big Ten team.
Exactly.
It is.
I think Oregon's in with 10-2.
Correct.
I think it depends on who the other 10-2 teams is. And I would feel that way about a bunch of 10-2 teams in the Big Ten. I'm just really nervous for overcorrection from the committee, and they put a bunch of 10-2 SEC teams in. I feel like we're being prepared for 10-2 SEC galore in the college football playoff this year. And obviously that's going to hurt the Big Ten maybe more than the other conference. The point is, the place where Oregon is most vulnerable is their secondary, and that's where Indiana torched them. And that's also where USC is good, is in their passing game. So do I think that USC, who from a talent standpoint, I think Indiana and USC are on par with each other right now. So do I think that a team with the personnel of high-level quarterback, NFL-level receiver can take advantage of an Oregon secondary that I just don't believe in at all? Yeah, I do believe in that because I just watched it on Saturday play out in my face. And I wouldn't be shocked if that happened again. But then also, Washington, high-level quarterback, NFL-level receiver, high-level running back. I think that could win that game. So it's, again, if I think you can go 9-3 just as easy as you can go 11-1, then it's hard for me to put you in a lock category because either one of those, if they're 9-3 after the last weekend of November, I won't be shocked. If they're 11-1 after the last weekend of November, I won't be shocked. I also feel the same way about Texas. How many Big 12 teams do you think are making the college football playoff this year? Texas Tech.
Oh, Texas Tech.
I mean, barring a bid stealer, probably just one.
And there are 2 undefeated teams in the Big 12 right now.
Yeah.
And they still have to play each other. And I think that game's coming up here soon. So I have both BYU and Texas Tech in Control Your Own Destiny. Because I do think that we could, if they play each other twice and there's a different winner in both situations, I think they both could get in.
Yeah, I think so.
And it makes the first game that much more important. Because if you win the regular season one, there's not this pressure of if you lose, you're out.
Yeah, you got to go undefeated, though. The loser of the Big 12 championship game has to be undefeated to get in.
Yeah, I agree.
Undefeated in the regular season, yeah.
Which is why I can't have them in the lock category, because that game is still out there. I can have them in the winner of that game is in the lock category, because I just think these are the best 2 teams in the Big 12. And the loser of that game is going to come out of that game still in a position where if we can just get back, where is the Big 12 championship game played? Dallas?
Jerry World.
Jerry World, yeah.
Okay. If we can just get the Jerry World undefeated, we can get our lick back. And we're in. Because as you both just pointed out, the committee last year didn't punish teams for losing on conference championship weekend because you had to earn the right to be in that game. So let's just say Texas Tech beats BYU. If BYU gets back on the field with Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game and wins the second time around, because it is hard to beat a team more than once. Oregon learned that lesson last year. I think all of a sudden you've got 2 Big 12 teams in, which again, chips at the SEC, chips at the Big 10. Because that's one more team from a conference that's not the Power 2 who's getting 2 teams into this conference. So because of that, I can't have either one of those teams in the lock category yet. But after that game, one of them is going to be in the lock category for me.
Yeah, I think for me too, the reason I also I approach this not just in terms of like locks, in terms of like resume. I also kind of separated these teams in tiers where it's like, you're right. There's Oregon has a tougher path than some of the other teams. I just think Oregon is that good where I'm really not worried about them against USC or Washington, because I view Oregon. And if you remember the preseason, I said Oregon was going to lose the game at Washington. I had Oregon not making the playoff, and I've pivoted because I think Oregon's just that good. I think they've looked better than I thought they were going to look. Texas Tech, I'm iffy on just because I do think they've kind of cruised through their schedule, and I do think they're good, but Big 12 is a step below, and I want to see it, up against some tougher teams. And I think this BYU, I think if they do against BYU what they did against Utah, I will think of Texas Tech among the national title contenders. Like, I think they could do it. I'm just not there yet. So I do have Texas Tech. Do we want to move on to our teams in control category then?
Yes.
So I think I have this was tough because the those in control, you can talk yourself into like basically like 4 teams in the Big 12, like 4 teams in the ACC, because it's like if you win your conference, you're in. But I tried to tier it again where I think teams, right? Because it's like, I don't know, if I like Clemson has a path to winning the ACC. I don't think it's going to happen though, right? Like Clemson controls their own destiny. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. So I went with my teams in control: Texas Tech, BYU, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Alabama. And the reason I have Georgia and Alabama in there because their toughest games are at home. So I think those teams I think they're going to be favored in their toughest games. So I think they do kind of control their own destiny. They don't have to pull off an upset to get to 11-1 or something along those lines. So I have Texas Tech, Texas A&M, BYU, Georgia, Alabama, teams that control their own destiny.
That's a fun group. I have, as you already know, Texas Tech and BYU, Oregon, and I have Washington. If Washington gets to the end of the season and their only loss is to Ohio State, and I don't think that's unreasonable, they're in the playoff. Because it's like, oh, we look terrible against Ohio State. So did everybody else. Like that's not a knock. I've got 3 SEC teams. I've got Texas A&M. I've got Ole Miss, and I've got Alabama. And I gave to your point, Stefan. I tried to splice it. And for me, if you are undefeated through the first 6 weeks of the season in the SEC, you do have a bit of control over your own destiny. Even if the back half of your schedule for some of these teams gets a little raunchy. Texas A&M avoided a lot of teams this year. A lot. They're the SEC's version of Indiana last year. Where they just the front half of their season was just so reasonable that if you could just get through that, it's like, okay, well, we can take a loss and still be fine. In fact, I think Texas A&M and between Texas A&M and Ole Miss, I think Texas A&M is more positioned to, if the SEC is going to have an undefeated conference champion, it's going to be Texas A&M over Ole Miss, because Ole Miss is still playing that we don't know who our quarterback game is, and they've also played a schedule that's allowed them to do that we don't know who our quarterback game is. And then I have Alabama, because as the weeks go on, the Florida State loss is looking more and more flukish and more like they just caught Alabama. Right. Every team can lose to everybody if you play the game 10 times. And Florida State just so happened to catch Alabama the 10th time when you could win that football game. If you played that game 9 more times, I think Alabama wins it every single time. So, yeah, those are mine. And then I have Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech's in control of its own destiny. I think Georgia Tech can very easily be the ACC champ because the only difficult game left on their schedule is Georgia. And I think if there's more pressure on Georgia to beat Georgia Tech this year than there is Georgia Tech to beat Georgia this year. And I love that. That's going to be a fun Friday night. We're going to be in Ann Arbor in a hotel watching that game. But I think it's funny that an SEC team has more pressure to win a football game against an ACC team than an ACC team has. Because if Georgia Tech's 11-0, it's like, okay, we lost to Georgia. Then we're going to go play Miami and potentially still get into the college football playoff if we beat Miami in the ACC championship game. Or they beat Georgia, and it's no different than what I was talking about with BYU and Texas Tech, except both of these teams are undefeated. So those are my control on destinies. The only reason Georgia Tech is not higher is because I think they're gritting out wins in a way that's eventually going to give them a loss, but I mean, you can talk, Andrew. You can talk.
Saturday. I didn't want
Who
to
they play Saturday?
They play Duke. Unranked Duke. 1.5 point favorite at home against Georgia Tech.
That's a nasty way for this to end.
Stinks a little bit, doesn't it? Stinks just a little bit.
All right, Gillis, who are yours?
So I was much more literal with this, which I don't think is going to be the favorite thing you guys have ever heard. I don't have many teams in my segment 3. I have a lot of teams in, tier 2.
How is everybody in control? If everybody's in control, then nobody's in control.
So that was kind of the thing that I was having this like moral dilemma at like 11:30 last night. Like, are we all in control of our own destinies? Is it predestined? Like, I was really having some troubles because, like, here's the example that I thought of.
How many Celsius did you have yesterday?
Oh, 0. I'm trying to cut back. LSU 5-1 is number 10 team in the country. They play Vanderbilt, number 17 team in the country, in Nashville, who's also 5-1. Both of those teams technically control their own destiny. Like, both of those teams are very much in control of what happens the rest of the way. In the top 25 poll, I have it up right now, there are 2 teams that have 2 losses. One of them is Texas. One of them is Notre Dame. You could genuinely make a case that everybody in the top 25 right now is in control of their own destiny. So I did try to lop some of that fat off. But like, I have a lot. I have A&M, Ole Miss, Bama, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Missouri, Vanderbilt. Those are my SEC teams in control of their own destiny because they all have 0 losses or 1 loss. Like, they are all very much in play. And like, do I think Tennessee is going to lose this weekend to Bama? Yeah. But Tennessee could theoretically beat Bama, and then they play Kentucky, who stinks, next week. And then all of a sudden they're going into November. They have SoCon Saturday coming up, and they've got a 6-1 record. And it's like, man, they lose one more game, they're still in. Like, a 10-2 SEC team's probably making it. So that was my big holdup. I have Georgia Tech in this mix. BYU's undefeated. BYU controls their own destiny because BYU doesn't like if BYU plays Texas Tech, like I think Texas Tech is going to win the Big 12, but BYU still does control their own destiny. So I had BYU. I have Cincinnati in this mix because Cincinnati avoids both of them. Like I had a lot. I had like 16 teams in this mix. I have Michigan. I have Washington.
When they expand the playoff.
No, I just think so.
We're gonna blame Andrew Gillis for why it happened.
If we,
I think 30 million teams who control their own destiny.
But I'm not. Here's the thing: I'm not wrong because they all do control their own destiny, and I think this Saturday, if I could coin a phrase, is going to be called "Get Got Saturday." Like USC controls its own destiny. I think USC is going to lose this Saturday, and then they might need some help. Like. Georgia Tech, I think, is going to lose this Saturday. They might need some help. Ole Miss is going to pick up a loss. Teams are going to start to pick up losses. Tennessee is going to pick up a loss, I think, this weekend. So there's
destiny. This is
sounds like a lot.
I played this very little.
A lot of teams. You know what it sounds like? A lot of teams who are on the fence.
Yeah. But
which is why I created that entire category of on the fence, and yet you put everybody in the controlled destiny.
Yeah, because they do.
You know what happened? You are literally the reason I created the on the fence category. You specifically, because I knew you were going to do this. Hey, everybody controls their own destiny, but they also could not control their own destiny. I don't know. Will they or won't they? Will James Franklin win a big game, or will he finally bottom out and get fired? I don't know.
I viewed the control your own destiny category as like even if you lose a game, you can still control your own destiny. That's kind of how I took it because I like most you can't assume all like how many days are we removed? Like 4 or 5 days removed from Indiana winning at Oregon. I don't think we can just be like, well, okay, if this team's like there's going to be upsets along the way. Right. You have to kind of project like which teams can lose and still be able to control their own destiny. That's kind of how I viewed it. Like in this era of college football, I don't think control your own destiny just means everyone goes 12-0 or 11-1. Like,
of course not. And not all these teams are going 12-0, 11-1, as I just laid out. But like their path is right there. Like they're sitting in their room going, if we win our games, even if we lose one of our games, we're in. Like Tennessee's 5-1. If Tennessee goes 10-2, they're making the college football playoff.
Dude, you can't. Not every 10-2 SEC team can make it, especially if a BYU or someone steals a bid.
Okay, we're missing each other. I think we're saying the same thing, but we're missing each other. Because here's what's happening.
I think there's going to be like 7 10-2 teams in the SEC.
I'm not saying there's going to be 14 10-2 teams in the SEC. That's not what I'm saying.
I think that's what's going to. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that's going to happen because I think there's going to be upsets along the way. Like I think Arkansas is going to beat somebody. Like I think there's going to be upsets along the way. But as we sit here right now, it is just before noon on the East Coast on October 15th. Exactly the halfway point through October.
You can just.
It is exactly midway. It was pretty much probably closer to the minute halfway through October. Not all these teams are going to go 11-1. Not all these teams are going 12-0. Not all these teams are going 10-2. But each individual team is looking at it going, we can go 11-1. Ole Miss is going, we can go 12-0. Tennessee is looking at it going, we can go 11-1. Bama is looking at it going, we can go 11-1. So that's they're not Bama's not sitting around and going, well, we could lose one more and be fine. No, they're thinking if we control what we can control, and we run the table.
That's our job. Our job is to say, okay, what if they lose a game? Obviously, Caleb DeBoer is taking into account a loss. I know. Caleb DeBoer is also not on the committee. He's also not on a podcast projecting the 12-team.
But they control their destiny. They control their destiny.
All right, Coach Gillis. That's what you sound like. Okay, guys, we can still. This is what James Franklin sounded like in the locker room after they lost to Oregon, when he let Jim Knowles up there to talk. He went, listen, guys, we're still in control of this. We can still accomplish all of our goals. And they all went, and then they went out the Rose Bowl and lost to UCLA, who hadn't won a game all year. And then they went, listen, guys, It's a bad loss. But remember, Ohio State, they lost to Oregon, and they had a bad loss, and they still got in. And they had a run, and they won a natty. They came back, and they accomplished the thing they wanted to do. I know they didn't get all of it, but they got most of it. Even though they got one of the three things, they got the biggest one of the ball. And his team went, nah, and then they lost to Northwestern that Saturday. And now all of a sudden, James Franklin doesn't have a job anymore. I agree with Stefan. You have the entire world saying that they have control over their own destiny.
I wish so much that UCLA had just beaten Northwestern, because Gillis would have to put UCLA in this category because they would be 3-0 in Big Ten play. And I think at 2-1 in Big Ten play, UCLA to some extent does control their own destiny. I just think that highly of Ohio State and Indiana that we might just have two undefeated Big Ten teams. So a one loss, or no, UCLA, if they beat Ohio State, if UCLA wins out, they make it to Indy. Gillis, you have to put them in this category. If they win out, they're going to Indianapolis, and they can win the Big Ten and make the playoff.
They have 3 losses.
They have one loss. Yes, but they have one loss in Big Ten play, and the Big Ten champ has to get in.
Yeah, but if they win out, did they play Indiana?
They play Ohio State. So if they win out and they play Indiana,
did they play Oregon?
No,
they don't play Oregon.
If they have wins against Ohio State and Indiana, they're making it to Indy.
I don't think they would make the Big Ten championship even if they went out.
Yes, they would.
They would have wins against Ohio State and Indiana. Who else?
Yeah, but Washington.
Oregon's not getting in because Oregon doesn't have the tiebreaker over
Michigan.
Okay, hold on.
One Big Ten loss.
Hold on. You just said, but Washington lost to the team UCLA beat. Then we get to
it would be a wicked tiebreaker structure because you might have like 4 or 5 teams that are tied there.
Yeah, I'm trying to run through this in my head because I hadn't.
I demand that you put UCLA on your technically control their own destiny.
I'll put them on the fence. Fine.
I don't even know what just happened there. I feel like Andrew just said about 75 different teams. If they go 10-2, they're making the playoff. Okay, 12 teams make the playoff, and only in 11 of them.
I'm well aware of the arithmetic.
I don't know, man. If you're aware of the arithmetic, everybody can't go 10-2.
I'm not saying
that's fine. You did. You literally just went, they're going to go 10-2 and make the playoff.
No, I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying if this individual team goes 10-2, they're in. If this individual team goes 10-2. And it's one of those like push-pull things. If Tennessee goes 11-1, that means Bama's not going 11-1. Or if this team goes 10-2, this means this team's not going 10-2.
So you mean it's a bunch of teams. So it's a will they or won't they with all these teams?
Kind of. But
they have a definition for they have a phrase for that.
Destiny?
No.
Yeah,
you're destined to be sitting on the fence. Indecisive is what they call it. So which one? Fine, it's Andrew. I guess this one's for you since Stefan and I have more reasonable takes about this. Which one of you're in control of your own destiny is in the most? Who's on the fence?
He's not having
fun.
Who's
on the fence? Which team in your control category is teetering or dropping down? I should have said, Andrew, you have to put people in this tier. You can't ignore the tier. You have to put people here.
Well, so I do have 2 teams on the fence, and it's because they have 2 losses. I have Notre Dame and Texas, but I think, I look at it and I see both those teams lose one more time. I think Notre Dame is definitely in danger of losing. Like if Notre Dame loses another game, they're out. You don't need to have a conversation about Notre Dame the rest of the season. But I think if Notre Dame wins and goes 10-2, I think they're in. The only scenario, the reason why I have them on the fence is because you could get bid stealers like Stefan was talking about. Like if you get to the end of the line and Texas Tech is 12-0 and loses the Big 12 championship game. If Miami is 12-0 and loses the Big 12 championship game, like if you have 2 ACC, 2 Big 12, 1 G5, because again, Miami and Texas Tech, you're not leaving a team that went 12-0 in the regular season out. If you get 5 out of that, all it takes is 7 from the Big 10 and the SEC. So that's 4-3. It doesn't matter which conference, and Notre Dame's out. So That to me is the scenario, but I do think we're going to end up in a scenario where, seeing as how Notre Dame is ranked, they are getting respect that not a lot of teams are getting at 2 losses, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think if Notre Dame wins their final, whatever, 6-5, whatever games they have left, I think if they win, they're in. So Notre Dame is on the bubble.
But they're not in control of their own destiny, though. That sounds like
no. Here's the thing. Here's the difference. No. See, here's the difference. I thought about this a lot. Here's the difference. They are in control of their own destiny. I think if they go 10-2, they're in. But
here he goes again. We're gonna make you put that on a T-shirt.
But it's not like a lock because of the bid stealers, because they don't play in a conference. That's where not playing in a conference championship game could hurt them, because if they go 10-2 and they lose in a conference championship game, it doesn't really matter. Like the committee already showed us they're not going to penalize it, but other teams might steal some bids from them. And then I'm looking at a team like, a Georgia Tech. I'm looking at a team like a Duke. I'm looking at a team like a Virginia. Like if one of them pulls a massive upset on Miami in the ACC title game, Miami's still in the playoff, but Duke just took a bid from somebody that you didn't think so.
Notre Dame's in an interesting spot because, like in theory, if they cruise and they go 10-2, I still don't like. Gillis, how high do you think they're ranked? Like no higher than, I don't think they get a home game if they're 10-2.
It'll be close. There were 2 teams. I looked last night. Tennessee and Ohio State were ranked in the top 8 in last year's rankings. And I think frankly, I think it depends on what the rest of their schedule does. USC does play Oregon, so like Notre Dame, they've gotten every break that Notre Dame has needed to go its way has gone its way after their 2 losses. A&M has been awesome. Miami has been awesome. I don't see those teams really slowing down. And if they beat USC and then like USC goes out and wins the rest of their games, okay. Like USC would only have one Big Ten loss at that way. So it's like Notre Dame hosting a playoff game is not out of the realm of possibility as like a 7 or an 8 seed.
No team, I think, cares more about those first rankings than Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame needs those first rankings to be kind to them.
Yes.
Texas A&M schedule is so easy.
They do have to go to Death Valley.
Oh no.
It's a tough place to play.
LSU schedule's been easy too.
So is Penn State. Tough place to play.
It is a tough place to play. We don't have to make jokes about everything. We could say that it's tough to play in Death Valley. It's tough to play in the White House.
It is also because LSU gets night games literally all the time.
The SEC's got to be furious about that.
No, the SEC's the one doing it.
I mean, like other teams in the SEC. Sorry.
Yeah. They are.
Yeah, I was gonna say you would know.
Maybe all right. So, Stefan, this one is for you and I. Then, who's the scariest team in your fence and help categories?
Yeah. So, let me say the teams I've got, and then I'll say what my scariest one is, I guess. So on the fence, mostly control, but don't necessarily have a ton of room for error. I also try to take into account schedules, right? Like I have Ole Miss in this category. Could they go undefeated, win out, and control their own destiny, like we talked about in the last category? Sure, but they're 7.5 point underdogs at Georgia this weekend. So you have to take into account that they're probably not going to go undefeated. In which case, an Ole Miss team with 2 or 3 losses, I think they need some help, right? So Ole Miss, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Virginia, Utah, and Cincinnati. Utah and Cincinnati play each other. I don't know if that's this weekend or coming up, but that's a huge game, and I think the loser's probably out of it. Whereas the winner will still need help down the road, but they're in a much better spot. Like a Georgia Tech, for example, we talk about that Georgia game not counting toward their ACC standings, and they could very well, even if they lose to Georgia, be 11-1 and make the ACC title game. I don't know where an 11-1 Georgia Tech is ranked. I don't know if they're, hey, you can lose to Georgia and lose to Miami and still be in. So, and those are 2 really tough games, right? Like those are 2 games where they're going to be underdogs. So they're going to need some things to go their way, and they probably have to pull off an upset or 2 to make it. So Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Virginia, Utah, Cincinnati for me. The scariest team in there, it's tough. I'd probably lean Notre Dame, just because I do think their defense is starting to play much better than we saw at the start of the season. And if their defense is starting to click, and that's why I think this USC game is going to be a huge test, because if their defense has shown that they're better, defending against this USC offense than they were against Miami or Texas A&M, then I think what that Notre Dame offense is doing makes that kind of a scary pairing. So I'd lead Notre Dame right now. Now, if Maeva comes out and puts a 40 piece on them, even if Notre Dame wins, like if Notre Dame wins 45-40, I'm probably not too scared of Notre Dame. But I'm open to the idea of their defense improving and them being a factor in the college football playoff.
So I've got in my fence category Nebraska. I think they're there. They're right there, and they'll keep poking at it. They're not necessarily in control, even though they have one loss already, because their one loss is to a team I have further down on the schedule. I'm further down in my tiers right now, and it's the same thing with USC. Where right now I think they are on the fence if they get through that Notre Dame game, which would help. I think it would help everybody if they can knock out Notre Dame, because then it's also okay. There's something intriguing going on here with USC, where I think they start to get a little bit more scary if Lincoln Riley has seemingly figured it out. So that was my number one scary is I think it was very fitting that USC's welcome to the Big Ten last year was in Ann Arbor. I also think it's very fitting that Ann Arbor coming to California was USC's opportunity to show we're ready to play in the Big Ten now. And we're going to do it. And at the same time, they showed Ohio State how they need to handle that game. But also, I didn't feel like USC got whooped in the trenches like I did a year ago. I felt like they held their own in the trenches. They forced Michigan to cover their receivers. And then once it opened up the run game, you saw their freshman running back start to get busy. I felt like that was a neutral with the trenches in a way that it was not last year. And I've started to gain some respect from Lincoln Riley. I feel like this year has been the year of I'm gaining respect for programs who had none of my respect for the last 4 or 5 years, whether it's Miami or USC and what they've been able to do. My other fence teams, I have Georgia. Georgia's playing with fire too much every week. And sometimes when you're a team like that, when you eventually get on the field with somebody who really is a contender, it doesn't go well. And that's what happened when they got on the field with Alabama. And that's November is where you separate the contenders from the pretenders. And I'm fearful that Georgia is a pretender. And every time they get on the field with a contender, it's not going to look good. And maybe they've already got 2 or 3 losses by the time they get to the Georgia Tech game to begin with, because they are not that good of a team this year. They have just been able to dance with Auburn. Like, think about it, Stefan. We were watching that game as we were driving back. How different is that game if they don't rule out a fumble at the end of the first half?
That was a ref show, by the way, on the
But
that was
right.
awful.
And they got new life because of it. And I don't know how many more opportunities they're going to have where they're going to 100% get new life out of what they're doing.
Well,
on the fence teams, I've got Tennessee on the fence. I think Tennessee and Georgia have a lot in common, where they're both fake good. And that's fine. It just means you don't make the playoff. But you have to show it this over the next couple of weeks here. And then I've got Missouri in this category. Again, another team where I think I have 4 SEC teams in this category. 3 of them I think are going to end up tipping towards the fake good side. And then there's LSU, who, like Ohio State, unfortunately had their week 1. This should be the shiniest thing on our resume. Win wiped off because those teams ended up not being that good. Now, Texas has birthed some new life here, and it seems like Clemson's starting to birth a little bit of new life here, but those wins are supposed to be shinier than they are. I think Ohio State has dominated the rest of its schedule in a way that has allowed them to, regardless of what's happened to Texas, remain the number 1 team in the country. LSU lost to Ole Miss because it couldn't run the ball. And so it's not a bad loss. It's just the game you lost against a team that's also undefeated right now. I think Vanderbilt's about to come back down to earth, so I think LSU is going to win that game. Texas A&M has not had to try this year. I said it earlier. They've been this year's SEC version of Indiana, where their schedule has been Of the SEC teams that we think are playoff teams, I think their schedule has been the most reasonable so far, and I do think LSU comes out of that with a win. And it's not just because it's at night in Happy Valley. I just think LSU's a good football team. The Alabama game is intriguing to me, but to quote another guy who apparently loves 10-2 teams, I think a 10-2 LSU team could get in to the college football playoff if their losses are to two other teams in the field and they're both by less than a touchdown. Especially since both of those losses will have been on the road.
I have a question for you about Georgia, because Georgia plays number 5 unbeaten Ole Miss this week at home, and they are 7.5-point favorites. Like, if they win, would they move up for you into that control your own destiny category? Because again, like, they would have a top 5 win, whether or not you think Ole Miss is that good, but Ole Miss is undefeated. So I'm curious what you like. Would they move up if they win this game? Because like they have a week off, then they play in the world's largest cocktail party. They play Florida, then they play Mississippi State. Like, those should be 2 wins. And you play Texas, Charlotte, and Georgia Tech. Like, they win this weekend, you could realistically lose to Texas or Georgia Tech and still make the playoff.
And you want to know why I agree with you? It's because I have them in the on the fence category, because if they win that game, they can move up. But if they lose that game, they can move down.
I think we just disagree on the semantics.
On being on the fence?
Yeah.
I think most people
love a good semantics conversation.
Yeah, this is not.
You're sitting on the fence, but you control your destiny which way you go.
So anyway,
fair enough.
I'm not giving that any credence there. Who needs help? I have Notre Dame in the who needs help category. I think they are the wrong type of 10-2 while also being the right type of 10-2, because they're the right type of 10-2 because they need help. They can surely get the help they need. But they're the wrong type of 10-2 because you are leaving yourself open to every possible scenario for how you get left out of the college football playoff. Whether it's because there's bid stealers or because they just put a bunch of 10-2 SEC teams. Like, if the option is 10-2 SEC, 10-2 Notre Dame, I think 10-2 SEC gets in. Mm-hmm. If the option is 10-2 Big Ten or 10-2 Notre Dame, I think the Big Ten gets in. I think if the option is a one-loss non-conference champ in the Big 12 this year, I think the one-loss non-conference champ in the Big 12 gets in. I think if Miami somehow stumbles in the ACC championship game and loses, I mean, we know who's getting in that situation. One, because Miami has one loss, but even if they had 2 losses, they have the head-to-head win. Notre Dame needs and is in a position that they can get help, but they also need a very specific type of help. They need these conferences to start cannibalizing each other. And it can't just be one. Yeah. They need multiple conferences to cannibalize themselves for Notre Dame to get in.
Yeah, like I think I'm not there with you on all of that. Like, if it's 10-2 Big Ten, what if that 10-2 Big Ten is USC? Then if Notre Dame beats USC, Notre Dame's getting that bid, which is why I think that this weekend is so interesting, and why that game is very interesting.
But again, sure.
I think Notre Dame beating USC, considering what USC has on its schedule the rest of the way, like, Notre Dame could get boxed out by the Big Ten, but I also think Notre Dame could find itself in realistic, hey, we're going to steal a bid from the Big Ten if it's the right Big Ten team or teams.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a very specific way to get the help.
Well, I mean, it's a very specific way not to get the help too. Like, I think, like, if it's like, what if USC beats Oregon and Notre Dame beats USC, and Oregon and USC and Notre Dame are 10-2. Notre Dame has that advantage.
Notre Dame's got the head-to-head.
That's what I'm saying. And like, Notre Dame would have that advantage over Oregon, I think, because they would have a similar opponent, and Notre Dame beat them. So, like, I think it depends on the type of team that you're talking about. I think there are some teams where frankly Notre Dame would be screwed, and I think there's some teams where they're in an advantageous position.
I've also got in my help category Virginia. I think they're loud, but that's going to be a hard way to climb. Big Ten wise, I've got Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota. Minnesota's not out of this thing. They are not out of the Big Ten title hunt. They've got one loss, and it's again, we looked bad against Ohio State. So has everybody else. That's not a reason to keep a team out of a playoff. Do I think they're going to get there? No. But if things get wacky, could Minnesota end up in the Big Ten championship game? Maybe. But that's why I have them in the help category. I have Cincinnati and Utah in the help category as well, because I've got two Big 12 teams in the control your own destiny category. And if you got two teams from a conference that's not the SEC or the Big Ten in a control your own destiny, that means the other side of that coin is like you have no control over your own destiny. You need some help. And that's both of those teams for me. And then I've also got Oklahoma. That's a bad loss to Texas, and their schedule gives them no grace at all. You know what? Even if they had beaten Texas, I think I still would have had Oklahoma in this category, because their schedule is about to be a mammoth of a next 4 or 5 weeks here, to where it's unreasonable to think they come out of the other side of this undefeated, whether Mateer is completely healthy or not. I've got Texas, though it does seem like the world already wants to offer them that help. They should not be ranked. That's disgusting. They should not be ranked right now. And I'm wondering what the committee is going to do with Texas. And then I've got Vanderbilt, because I think they're going to start coming back down to earth a little bit here, and they're going to need some help to get in. That's my help. Virginia, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Cincinnati, Utah, Oklahoma, Texas, and Vanderbilt. This is my biggest category, because it should be my biggest category after 6 weeks of college football, is that there are a lot of teams who need some things to fall their way in order for them to get into the college football playoff.
I'll go next. I don't have Vanderbilt on my. I don't think Vanderbilt's a good football team.
Whoo!
And I love Diego Pavia. I don't think Vanderbilt's a good football team. They beat Virginia Tech, who fired their coach, and sure they battled with Alabama. But if you watch that game, second half it was not really. I was never too worried about Alabama. So I need some help. I have Illinois, Michigan on here as well. LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Missouri, USC, Texas, Nebraska, and Washington. These are all teams that I think that they're going to lose probably at least one more game this year, or like best case scenario, they're 10-2. And I think a lot of these 10-2 resumes are, you probably need some help from others to get in at 10-2. So, and then there's like also other factors like Oklahoma, needs some help. Like, yeah, they need their quarterback to get healthy. Like trying to see what, like Illinois, they control their own destiny to get into 10-2, but like, man, like Indiana had one of those ugly losses last year, and people have two ugly losses like that. It's going to be really tough for you to get in, especially, like granted, if they go 10-2, they've probably beaten USC, which is probably a better win than any win Indiana had last year. So like maybe they could get some decent wins. I think they also traveled to Washington, so they have a chance to get better wins on their resume than Indiana had last year. But like, man, you lose to a team by 50, it's going to be tough. And then you're I don't care what the final score said. Everyone who watched Ohio State, Illinois knew that Illinois was never really in that game. So it's like Illinois is going to need help even if they go 10-2. So that's why I don't really have them controlling their own destiny. So Illinois, Michigan, LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Missouri, USC, Texas, Nebraska, Washington, all teams that I think are pretty good, but probably will lose another game or two. And in doing so, they probably need some help to get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, we have some overlap. I have UVA. These are teams that I kind of had, maybe I guess you could call it like down ballot voting, because I think they're, not to relitigate the whole debate we just had about like the Big Ten and the SEC, and like if you go 11-1 in these conferences or 10-2 in these conferences, are you like automatically basically in, or not. But I have Utah, Nebraska, Virginia, Duke, Illinois, and SMU. I think there's a few teams in there where you kind of map out a scenario where it's like, wait a minute, like they're unranked, but yeah, they need some help. But like I look at a team like Duke. Like Duke plays Georgia Tech this weekend at home. They're favored. And they play at Clemson, at UConn, Virginia, at North Carolina, and Wake Forest. Like, those are 3 winnable games against Georgia Tech, Clemson, and Virginia for Duke. They're also 3 losable games. So it's like, even if you win those games, I don't know if it's a lock that you're in. You would have to like win the ACC for that to happen. So like, I don't know if that's the case. So there's a few teams, I guess, down the ballot where you're like, wait, they have to win out, but like, again, like you said, like a team like Illinois, I don't think they're gonna have the resume even if they do win out. So those are my teams.
Who can escape this category? Who has the best chance of taking some steps up?
Ooh.
I don't think I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think Missouri's schedule down the stretch is that difficult. And I have them in this category. They go to Auburn this weekend, which I don't think Auburn's good. Missouri's favored. It's only 1.5, but Missouri's favored. And then it's Vanderbilt, home against A&M, home against Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas. I'm not too scared of a lot of these teams on the schedule. So I think Missouri's keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on them because they have a really good running back. There's a chance. I'm not 100% sold on Alabama yet, so I don't know what to make of the Alabama-Missouri game. But if Alabama is this team, like I talked about at the start of the pod, of someone who emerges from the SEC, not just as an SEC champ, but like a legitimate title contender, we could look back on that Bama game and say, oh, we shouldn't have thought anything of Missouri after that. Like, that was just Bama being good and winning on the road. But Missouri is also a good team. So I'm open to the idea of Missouri making a run. I love Ahmad Hardy. I think that dude's electric.
He's really good.
I think Texas is going to make the playoff.
Gross.
I don't know why. I just got a feeling that Texas is about to make the playoff. They're not.
They have to play at Georgia, and 3 losses might be it.
So that would be my question, because I think if Texas makes the playoff, they will have beaten the rest of they're 4-2. They will have beaten Kentucky, Mississippi State, and then Vanderbilt at Georgia, Arkansas, A&M, and then they're going to the SEC championship game. And
if they're 10-2, they're getting in. If they're 10-2 and they lose in the conference championship game to Alabama, they're getting in.
I think that's fair.
I think at 10-2, at 10-2, we're not viewing them the same way we view them now. For them to go 10-2, that means they're playing a lot better. They've beaten some good teams, and I think we're looking at a 10-2 Texas as a good team.
I think there's 2 things that's happened here, and I'm going to use Penn State as the example for this. So, producer Brennan, can you focus me? Just like give me that. I'm pulling a Stephen A. Smith where I'm telling the producers what to do. Penn State lost a bad game after losing a good game, and their season fell apart. Texas lost a bad game after losing a good game, and they have gotten back on the horse. And I think what's happened with Texas is we've done 2 full swings from a national media of how we've talked about Texas. We've gone from supernova, God-level quarterback. He's going to win all the awards. He's the second coming of Tom Brady. He's all these things, right? We've done all this. And then he wasn't that because it was never reasonable to expect him to be that. And then you're having the New York Times write articles about how he's the biggest flop in college football history, as if there aren't flops every year in college football history, right? Arch Manning has not gotten to live in this is what he is world. He's constantly lived in he's either the greatest thing that's ever happened to football or he's the worst thing that's ever happened to football. So now that he's finally in the middle, he's a decent quarterback. Their defense is still awesome. Their weapons are a little bit more shaky than I think we expected them to be. But what if he's starting to figure it out? What if Texas is starting to figure it out? And if I think Georgia I'm still not sure what Georgia is. I think they're still an on the fence team who can go either way. You could blink and all of a sudden we're going, man, remember when Texas didn't look good the first month of the season and then they figured it out? And now they're one of the best teams in the SEC. I don't think that is unreasonable to ask. It's just, again, Arch didn't look good against Texas. Nobody looks good against Texas. Matt Patricia is scheming up every offensive coordinator and quarterback you can think about. And then they had a bad loss. But this could be Penn State right now, right? They could have lost back-to-back games. And then we're wondering how much longer Sarkisian is going to be the coach there. But he got him back on the horse. And what if that Oklahoma game was all the spark they needed? And right now, yes, they need some help, but they could very easily go from I need some help because we have 2 losses to I control my own destiny because I figured it out over the back half of the season, which, as Sark talked about before the Cotton Bowl, that is what the 12-team playoff has allowed, is your team to learn and grow and not feel like my season is over because we had a bad loss. And that's how we ended up with Ohio State and Notre Dame in the national championship game last year. What if it's a similar thing this year? And this doesn't mean I think Texas is going to go on to win the national championship. But if they win the SEC in a year where the SEC might not be that great, it's a bunch of mid teams, I think Texas is among those mid teams. And then it becomes any other Saturday you can win a football game. They don't scare me. But if I was an SEC program, they would scare me.
Yeah, doors wide open. Oklahoma could have shut it. And instead they let their rival get right back into it.
That's all it takes.
The kind of team that I think can make that leap is Nebraska out of this tier.
Same, yeah.
Like they're 5-1 and they lost to Michigan, but they play Minnesota this week. They're favored on the road. They play Northwestern next week. They'll be favored at home. Then they play USC at home, and that's going to be their toughest remaining game, I think, the rest of the way. They end with at UCLA, which who knows what UCLA is or is not right now.
They're a control your own destiny team. Remember?
No, they're not. They have 4 losses. They play at Penn State, which, again, who knows what is or isn't Penn State going to be? Who knows what the Nittany Lions are going to look like in a few weeks? And then they end the year with Iowa at home. So it's basically like, what if USC – you could make a case that 3-game stretch, because I think they're going to beat Minnesota. I think they're going to beat Northwestern. Is anybody going to disagree that they're probably not going to be 7-1? Like, does anybody think they're going to – I don't think so. So, like, they're 7-1 going into that last 4. There's a chance that, like, USC gets got this weekend and Notre Dame wins and USC doesn't look that good. And then you just think to yourself, like, maybe USC is just not that great. And then UCLA, maybe this Linsanity run ends. I don't think anybody would be surprised if it ended. I'm not saying they're going to be as bad as they were at the beginning of the year, but I don't think they're going to be, let's just blow everybody out on the schedule good. Penn State, who knows? They're playing a backup quarterback. They play Iowa. Like, it's going to be a very interesting conversation at the end of the year, even if they're 10-2. And like, you could convince me with 3 wins in a row, they start moving up a little bit, because none of their wins have been that convincing. They beat Cincinnati by 3. They lost to Michigan, obviously, but they beat Michigan State by 11. They had to come back really, really late against Maryland. Like I don't know. Like, Nebraska,
even if they're close, those are decent wins. I mean, Cincinnati's a good win. At Maryland, I think is a good win. Now, whether you're an SEC fan,
we'll see what Maryland does. They do this.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, yeah, we'll see what. But to this point, I think that's a good win. Obviously, if they bottom out, yeah, they're a bad team. But it's like, we can't do the SEC thing where it's, winning at Mississippi State is a good thing. It's like, I don't know, Maryland's pretty decent. Winning at Maryland's not necessarily the easiest thing. So I'm very open to the idea of Nebraska. By the way, keep talking about UCLA like they have 4 Big Ten losses. Those 4 losses doesn't matter.
No,
Big Ten losses is what matters in terms of controlling your own destiny over here.
Again,
I just want you to acknowledge their potential destiny.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, man. Everybody's got destiny.
I think UCLA thing would be hilarious, because if they won the Big Ten, it is. I said earlier, the Big Ten is guaranteed a spot. It's a top 5 ranked conference champs. And this is a good transition because 8-4 or 9-4, I guess, UCLA, it would be funny if they were not that, because there could be 2 G5 teams who finish ranked ahead of UCLA.
That's the case I was getting ready to make. I think I want to make a case for that. I think I can make a case for 2 American teams getting into the college football playoff. And it's because there are 2 American teams who are still undefeated right now.
And one of those teams that's undefeated is unranked. And they are ranked behind a 1-loss team in that same conference who is in the top 20.
Sure. Again, AP voting stops mattering in 2 weeks. Like, I'm not using that as the
litmus test, I think, for
no, that's fine. But do you think the loser between South Florida and Memphis is going to finish ranked in the top 12?
I think it depends on how wacky the other 4 conferences get.
I don't.
Probably not.
11-1 Memphis. I don't think is, or even 11-1 South Florida. I don't think they're good enough to be ranked in the top 15, because those teams are undefeated right now. And I know, like, whatever AP poll is not always that far off from the CFP, where those, like,
no,
we're talking about teams that are barely in the top 25. You need them to be in the top 12.
Well, some people's polls are not that far off from the college football playoff. Well, other people's polls are a little more brand based, but that's neither here nor there. That's not what we're here to talk about today. I think if this is the long shot case. If there's an undefeated G5 team and then there's an 12-1 G5 team, we're talking about Memphis and South Florida. Well, South Florida's already got lost. If South Florida were to beat Memphis in the American Conference Championship game,
and they play each other in the regular season,
right? So yeah, so Memphis would have to win the regular season game, and then South Florida gets the revenge in the conference championship game. The long shot case, and I know this is long shot, that's why I'm using it here. If the SEC has a bunch of 9-3 teams, because it literally starts cannibalizing itself, and then the Big 12 and the ACC do what they always do, in Ohio State, and then Indiana end up getting in, and the Big 10 does what it did last year, where it's like there's a bunch of elite teams. The middle class isn't as big as maybe it's starting to look right now. That's how the door opens up. Do I think it actually happened? No, but it's not an unreasonable case to, when you've got one conference that's got 16 teams and the other one's got 18 teams, you're opening yourself up to these years where those 18 and 16 teams just cannibalize each other. And are you about to start living in a world where 45% of the playoff field are 3-loss teams? And they're not like, oh, I lost in the conference championship game, 3 losses. No, I mean, like, you went 9-3 during the regular season. I don't think it's unreasonable. If this reality exists, I'm sure there will be somebody in there making the case of, like, I don't know, man, like, these teams I don't know, maybe none of these teams are that good. Are we going to ignore this resume that much?
It is a long shot. I would love Paul Feinbaum, and people would explode. Yeah, Senator Feinbaum. What's funny is I love Paul. I think Paul's an awesome dude.
Yeah, I've been on the show plenty of times.
If Senator Feinbaum, if a 9-3 SEC team got left out because an 11-1 or 12-1 Memphis team made it in or something like that would be. I mean, it would be a war, frankly.
We'd be at 16 teams in the playoff in 2026. That's what would happen.
You know what I think the most likely route is to 2 G5 teams making it? In the ACC, someone like a Clemson makes a run to the title game and wins the ACC. But they are 9-3 and they are not a good ACC champ. To where Miami's making it as an at-large. And your 5 conference champs that make it are the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, and then South Florida and UNLV. Because South Florida and UNLV both won their conference, and they're ranked ahead of Clemson. It's the 5 highest ranked conference champs. It doesn't have to be Power 4 plus 1. So like a Clemson making a run to an ACC title game and winning it, Clemson could get left out at 10-3 or whatever their record would be at that point. So because UNLV is undefeated, and all of a sudden their win against UCLA doesn't look like a bad win. And Boise State, who they play, I think this weekend, that like worst case that matches South Florida's win against Boise State. Now, South Florida's got some other good wins, right? They beat Florida State and Florida. So South Florida does have that. But like there is an interesting case for not an interesting case, an interesting route for two G5 teams to make it. So that's in the sleepers and G5 and kind of long shot category. It's not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible.
I think what has to happen too. I think you need one G5 team to really like to not even be a debate. Like you need a Boise of last year, I think, to really
South
kind
Florida
of
probably would be that.
Yeah, like you need like hey, this G5 team beat number 17 somebody. Yeah. Like this G5 team beat somebody good and they're 13-0, because then it's like, well, yeah, they're 13-0. They beat this team. They beat that team. You know, like let's say they beat, even if it's a crappy team, like, hey, they beat Arkansas and they beat like Memphis this year. Like it's like, hey, they beat Arkansas, but then they also beat Tennessee. They also beat Ole Miss. Like they have to beat somebody big. So it's the one team that's just so far in that you're good. And then I think that second team is where you start to get a little hairy. So I think you would need a G5 team. And like, frankly, the brands matter in the G5. Like UNLV is undefeated. And, you know, like you said, they have a win over UCLA and nobody's talking about them right now. Like, I think it would have to be a Boise, a Memphis, a somebody like that. Like if Akron was 6-0 and they go undefeated, I don't know if they're getting that benefit of the doubt.
Shout out to the Zips.
Shout out to the Zips. Zip up.
No, go Flashes. Nobody says zip up. You don't have to.
I just thought I don't know what they're. The MAC has such weird hashtags because it's like Bowling Green is like a Ziggy, and there's another one I can't think of at the top of my head.
Bowling Green's.
You said that with such conviction.
Eddie George got a cooking at Bowling Green.
Eddie George does have a cooking.
He does. I think it's unfortunate that South Florida's played Miami. And then I'm not saying it's unfortunate you play a Power 4 team. It's that this is the second year in a row where the clear like G5 team who's probably going to get it played a juggernaut in the regular season, right? I think Boise State, there's a lot of other Power 4 teams. If they'd have been on the schedule, I think Boise State could have pulled off a win. I think there are, to be frank about it, given how things have played out, if South Florida had played any other team in the ACC, I think they'd be undefeated right now. And then we'd be having a different conversation. I think we'd all be a little bit more, we still wouldn't predict it to happen, but I think you could wrap your head around it a little bit more. The idea of, okay, the American Conference is going to get 2 teams in the playoff this year. And it's because South Florida is undefeated, Memphis is undefeated, and South Florida is undefeated, includes a win over an ACC team who might be in the race to win the ACC right now. But that's obviously not what's going on here. But those are our lists. Those are our categories. Andrew's got everybody in the world saying that they can control their own destiny, while Stefan and I maybe have a more reasonable approach to this. But listen, that's normal. That's very normal on this pod at this point, is that I send out directions. Everybody either follows them and I go, yeah, I'm going to do what I want, or everybody's going to follow them, and then Andrew's going to go, I don't know, man. Let's use.
I think you could make the case that I follow them to a T. I think you can make the case that I followed them directly.
Yeah, you followed the directions too well this time.
I did follow the directions very well.
614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. This was fun. 90 minutes of this every single Wednesday at 11 a.m. 2-week free trial, 614-350-3315. It's down there. He did it. Brennan did it. I always forget to do it. That's why we have a producer now, because I can't do 2 things at once. I can't talk, host, and produce. It's just not a reasonable thing to ask anybody to do. It's like asking LeBron James to score 60 and also have 10 rebounds and 15 assists, except he does that every year for 20. He's doing To Me podcast now. I think it's over. It's over. It was a good run. You had a good run, LeBron. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the live show. Game preview show coming up next. This will be in your feeds if you weren't able to listen live. on Thursday morning. Then we'll come with the preview show as we get back into the Ohio State side of things as they go to face Wisconsin and their third home road game in 4 games. Potentially, they're probably going to be 7-0 because Wisconsin's not very good, and Ohio State's the best team in the country. And then we'll head into the bye week before we get into the real college football rankings, which will come out in about 3 weeks from yesterday. So 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and for our producer Brennan. Talk to you guys later.